From the PEP Radio Newsroom, these are the stories we are following at this hour. The Pentagon has deployed about 700 Marines to Los Angeles to respond to immigration protests alongside local law enforcement and the National Guard, U.S. Northern Command says. The troops will be deployed to protect federal property and personnel, including immigration agents, and are prohibited from performing law enforcement duties under the Posse Comitatus Act. The Pentagon is drafting guidelines that will explain to the Marines what they can and cannot do, a U.S. official said. Los Angeles Police Chief, meanwhile, Jim McDonnell, says the department has not been given any formal notification that the Marines will be coming to the city and that their arrival without coordinating with the police department would present a significant logistical and operational challenge. The state sued Trump over his use of the Guard troops as a growing numbers of demonstrators took to the city's streets for a fourth day. California Attorney General Rob Bonta announced the lawsuit by telling reporters that Trump had trampled the state's sovereignty. As if that weren't enough crazy news emanating from Washington, D.C., here's this story from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., once a leading anti-vaccine activist, has removed every single member of a scientific committee that advises the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on how to use vaccines and pledged to replace them with his own picks. The 17-member advisory committee on immunization practices has been in state of flux since Kennedy took over. Its first meeting this year had been delayed when the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services abruptly postponed its February meeting. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana is a doctor who expressed reservations about Kennedy's nomination but voted to install him as health secretary. Way to go, Bill. This is partly your fault. He says he spoke with Kennedy moments after the announcement. Of course, now the fear is that the advisory committee will be filled up with people who know nothing about vaccines except suspicion. In other words, all their research has come from Google. Cassidy says in a social media post. During Kennedy's confirmation, Cassidy expressed concerns about preserving the committee, saying he had sought assurances that Kennedy would keep the panel's current vaccine recommendations. Well, guess what? He didn't. Kennedy did not stick to that. He recently took the unusual step of changing COVID-19 vaccine recommendations without first consulting the advisors, or for that matter, anyone with a medical degree. Canada's Prime Minister says Washington no longer plays a predominant role on the world stage. No, that's right. We've already taken our bow, walked off stage, and gone to the after party. Mark Carney made the remarks in announcing Canada will diversify defense spending away from the United States. Carney also says Canada will achieve NATO's spending target of 2% of gross domestic product 5 years earlier than previously planned. We stood shoulder to shoulder with the Americans throughout the Cold War and in the decades that followed as the United States played a predominant role on the world stage. Today, that predominance, that's a thing of the past. Carney said in a speech at the University of Toronto. Trump's calls to make Canada the 51st U.S. state infuriated Canadians. Carney became prime minister after promising to confront the aggression shown by Donald Trump. And finally, here in Pennsylvania, a new bill introduced in the Pennsylvania Senate aims to bar minors from receiving gender transition medical procedures and block the use of public funds to pay for them. Senator Judy Ward, oh, good old Judy, introduced Senate Bill 843, known as the Do No Harm Act, which would prohibit doctors from performing procedures that alters a minor's hormones, removes sex organs, or changes physical appearance for gender transition purposes. Does that include hairstylists? Really, does it? The bill would not apply to treatments for congenital defects, early onset puberty disease, or physical injury. The legislation would also prevent state programs like Medicaid and CHIP from covering such procedures and would bar private insurers from offering policies that include this coverage. Supporters of the bill argue that minors are not developmentally able to make irreversible medical decisions. Ward said the measure is meant to protect children from procedures that may have permanent effects that they cannot fully understand. I don't think she fully understands how any of that works, but I digress. A Senate Majority Policy Committee hearing was held April 15th in Altoona, where testimony from detransitioners, which account for approximately 1% of the entire trans community, if even that many, parents and medical professionals, was shared in support of the legislation. Folks, that's news at this hour. And I got to tell you, back on that last story, the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the Endocrine Society of America, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and dozens of other professional organizations all support gender affirming healthcare, following guidance from the World Organization guarantee or protecting gender affirming care, WPATH. Well, anyway, that's the news at this hour. If you watch our news videos on YouTube, please subscribe to keep informed on news impacting the LGBTQ plus community. Download the Live 365 app to take PEP Radio with you wherever you go. And up next, we have the Meadville area weather forecast right here on PEP Radio.